From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new FP&A podcast. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by Data Rails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we will welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show. Francesca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
We're very excited to have you. So let me just give a little bit of background and then we'll give you an opportunity to tell a little bit more about yourself. So Francesca hails originally from Italy. She's currently located in the UK, and she's an expert when it comes to digital transformations. I learned a little bit about her through LinkedIn and then went out and checked out her website and saw that she is really an expert in the space. She's currently self-employed as a consultant for financial transformations. She previously served as a director at Diageo, as where she was the global director of a source-to-pay transformation project. She has a business website that she runs, Chris's Digital Transformation for CFOs. And we're really excited to have her on the show today. So again, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Sure.
So can you maybe tell us just a little bit about your career? I know, if I remember right, you started in accounting. You worked on a couple different transformations and then started your own practice. So maybe just walk us through a little bit of your background and how you ended up where you're at today.
It's an interesting question, Paul. I actually came to live in the UK, in London, where I still am, after I concluded my finance and accounting qualification. And that was the best thing I could do, because finance and accounting is the kind of competence of specialism that really sets you up in your career. Mm-hmm. So when I got to London, instead of working as a barista or in a pizzeria, I was immediately able to work in the finance and accounting department of the Intercontinental Hotel Corporations. That stood me up in good stead for my later career in financial and management accounting, and also for when eventually I got into IT in the mid-90s. So finance, my accounting qualification gave me both a good start in my professional adult life, mm-hmm. as well as a great springboard for a career in IT, and now a career in advising the CFO, in digital transformation, in understanding automation, etc., etc.
Yeah, no, that's a great background. And I can see where, kind of naturally fit together the accounting and finance. And then the 90s come when you start seeing the explosion of systems. And
that's exactly right, Paul. I saw in the mid-90s that it was essential that you had IT skills as you went up to the year 2000. And one of my first jobs in IT was being a system analyst in ERP implementations. That gave me a great understanding of the architecture of a business application that was absolutely essential in my later career, as I say.
No, and that totally makes sense. And, my first experience is similar to yours as a system analyst, and it was working on a software project on the procurement side before I moved into FP&A. But it was, invaluable to see that process and to learn more about how you implement a system.
And it should tell us, your career and my career, that kind of background should be a lesson that I'm very willingly sharing for the type of competencies that the younger generation need to keep themselves relevant in the marketplace. We are at a historically almost unique time when technology is increasingly intelligent, literally so.
Yep.
Therefore, it is increasingly essential that finance people really understand the technology. It's no longer just about the numbers, just about the figures. It also has to be about the technology that underpins your financial accounting, financial planning and analysis, etc.
No, I totally agree. I mean, having the right technology stack and the ability to get actionable insights out of your data is invaluable in this time of uncertainty and change. More important than it's ever been before.
And the exciting thing, Paul, I mean, you and I, we're not 5 minutes into any conversation that we get excited about FP&A, but I think the exciting thing is, to an extent, the challenges in finance are the same, right? It is about the management of cash. It is about driving efficiencies, keeping the cost out of business. But the enabling tools are not. This is the uniqueness of this historical moment, because right now, AI, artificial intelligence, allows the integration of this, of external data that has not been traditionally used by accountants, by CFOs, by the FP&A teams. Data, external data such as sentiment analysis harnessed via the social media, the weather, the lockdown states. And that provides an extraordinary insight when it's aligned to the internal data, where again, the new FP&A tool allow the integration with the unified internal data from your ERP, your CRM, your HR, your human resources manager, your HRM systems, etc.
Mhm.
That's why it is now called, maybe it's a fashionable definition, moniker, but we call it X P&A, no longer just simply FP&A. And it indicates specifically this augmentation of capabilities of human intelligence that the new artificial intelligence, the new automation, cognitively intelligent tools allow.
Yeah, no, definitely the tools are reshaping the way we think about things. But, before we can get advantage of those tools, we have to get them successfully deployed, right? I mean, that's critical. And, on your website, I noticed you talked about 3 things that are critical for a deployment. And you said act strategically, deploy effective change management, and then kind of my favorite, because I think we often miss it, is put your house in order. Can you maybe talk a little bit about why those 3 things are really the key to a successful deployment?
Sure. So the first 2, if you like, strategy and change, they come from the systematization of research conducted by the London School of Economics on automation projects. They have found, the LSE has found, that the 75% of failure in these automation projects come from a lack of a strategic alignment within the enterprise and a lack of change management capability. So on the strategy front, if you like, the recommendation is to standardize the processes, actually centralize the processes, standardize them, optimize them, and then and only then automate. Now, this, yes, it comes from a theoretical perspective that I quote at the LSE when I recently did a course on automation, but it aligns very, very deeply with my own experience. I've been on projects, I've seen steering boards misaligned on the basics of the transformation. And now, especially now, the difficulty is in the fact that everybody the CFO is under extraordinary pressure to automate. Extraordinary pressure. So everybody wants to automate. And the software vendors are very clever. Because their products are increasingly truly intelligent. The technology out there is miraculous. But of course, they tend to oversell all their cognitive technology as artificial intelligence, and therefore often they confuse the CFO, they confuse the enterprise. So definitely the recommendation is to align on the strategic aspect of the transformation. The second is the change management. Change management is a discipline very much misunderstood. People think that you've done a workshop for an afternoon with people and you think we need to do some communication and some training, and people think that is change management. It isn't. And I've come up in my experience, in my profession, with a methodology that plugs the change management into the delivery practices. So wrapping the change management around some governance, work with the project team, the business operations team, working together to get to the goal of the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my change management. Now, what I would claim absolute as being of my own invention is the putting the house in order. Because it seems to me, as I look at all these clever solutions from the clever software vendor, and I think there's no artificial intelligence solution that will fix your problem, that will give you magically a finance information model. This is what you have to do. You have to have the properly designed finance information model that feeds all your operation financial management reporting requirements. Then you have to embed it in the ERP as the thread that binds all the technology together. So the ERP would feed all the downstream systems, such as the data warehouse. And it's essential that the financial information model should be well designed, well deployed, and so on. Of course, I've touched on the criticality of the data quality, data governance, data compliance, data control. But part of the third element for me of putting your house in order is that please make sure that the ERP is fully configured. Avoiding the need for the manual accounting. There's so much of it is done at the month end with the poor finance analysts running around doing manual journal to fix transactions that have not posted into the general ledger because of a shoddily configured ERP. These are the very, very basic. And putting the house in order simply appeals, Paul, to don't invest money in artificial intelligence, expensive solution if you haven't done these basic things yet. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. What they say is, many transformations you look at, planning tools, they end up back in Excel without a tool. They end up using it as a repository, right? Because they haven't put their house in order. They haven't really thought through what they need or managed change management. And if you don't manage it right, people go back to what they're comfortable with. I've seen 2 projects in my career, and these are more around, kind of billing projects, but I came into a company where we had outsourced a portion of our billing to an outsourced firm, and we really didn't have a tool. They were doing it all manually, and it was such a problem. We brought it back in-house. And the first year we brought it back in-house, the team found nearly $12 million between customers not being billed, stuff sitting on balance sheets that didn't belong there, all those type of things. And we were trying to save money, And we obviously we didn't save any money if we had $12 million we hadn't recognized.
Of course.
And I've seen that more than once in my career, others where
Yes.
outsourcing stuff before you've standardized your billing process and then wondering why you have more billing problems than you did before.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, Paul, when I hear the likes of your experience, which completely aligns with mine, I think, why aren't we finance practitioners of old? Why don't we say these things more powerfully, more publicly, more creating the kind of conversation that is painful, but it must be had, otherwise you create you actually don't create value, you destroy value in the organization. So
no, that's a great point. And finance, as we like to say, we're business partners and we want to be steward of value creation. One of the key areas is we have to speak up on these projects because we've all seen them. And I'm sure many of us at some point or another have kept quiet, even though we know it's going to be a disaster. And, we know there's some things they forgot. Like I remember I was new into a company and I'd come in and they were testing something and every single person I asked about it goes, this is going to be a disaster. They'd already made the decision and a year later they wrote the project off and started over.
yeah.
And I was like, either people didn't listen or people didn't speak up enough. But either way, I mean, for my, I was 2 months in and it was apparent to me that nobody believed this thing was going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't manage change management for sure. If nobody believes it's going to work, and you probably haven't put your house in order. And so odds are this is going to be one of those that just fails. As we talk about, we see that very common. So, I noticed you started your own practice in transformations. What led you to start your own practice? Why did you decide to do that?
Very simply, the project for which that you alluded to at the beginning, this global transformation of the source to pay domain at Diageo, there was a project supporting £1 billion sterling of indirect spend. I was director of transformation there. Now, Diageo is a global corporation, is an amazing company. They have their delivery methodology is super robust, is super well thought out, thought through, super, etc. It still took me to bring the teams together, to bring the business acceptance group together, make sure that they were aligned, that they would be given a voice in approving the design and the implementation of the new solution so that they felt completely part of the transformation. They were not just teams to which the transformation was done to. They became, they were entitled to ask the reasons behind the solution, to review the solution, to work with the project analyst in improving the solutions. And I was able to make them so regionally, locally powerful so that they in turn enlisted, engaged the local super users. And then together with the program director and the overall program director and we had a great engagement program for all the regional and central leaders, so that we would go to them, we would explain what the solution would transform within Diageo, within that domain. And then we would say, and we are training your people and we are working with your business acceptance group people. They understand the solution. They've signed off the design, the UAT, and they are signing off launch. Are you happy to also support launch? Of course, by that point, when you brought the negotiation so tight, so closely to where it matters, then people can't say no, right? And
Hmm.
we did. And when I joined, I joined at the end of 1 year, and we were live globally by the October of the following year. Now, when I finished that project, I thought, I've seen now um, how essential uh, is to be able to drive the transformation strongly. To have
Yep.
somebody that really drives, goes after the issues, engages the leadership, works with people, motivates people. And that is what I then thought, right, this is it. I've done enough IT as a project manager. IT has
Hmm.
been great to me, but actually my calling is now within that kind of enterprise change management, engage in the leadership type role. That's why I set myself up as a consultant doing that.
No, that makes sense. And as I listened to you tell that story, that was fascinating. But a couple things, that stuck out to me is one is communication, right? You communicated, you communicated, you communicated. And just as important, if not more so, is you communicated and empowered, right? You asked people to test, you asked them to be involved, because we've all been part of the projects where they
Yeah,
communicate in the sense of we're going to shove this down your throat. Here's the
yeah,
communication
yeah.
versus we want you to be happy with this and we want to make your life easier. And, there's definitely a difference between that. And people pick it up really quick when it's shoved down your throat type of communication versus empowering and involving people. So I really like that example because I can see how you made sure you put things in place, to increase those chances of success.
I'm a believer, absolute believer in democracy. An enterprise transforms with the participation of all its people. But I don't just pay lip service to these concepts. You have to be able to articulate them across governance, across cross vertical plannings between the business readiness, the business acceptance group, and the other work stream within the project. It has to be an absolutely aligned governance, aligned set of concepts, aligned set of teams. Because when you do that and you bring people together, you'll soon find out that when people get to know each other, they'll work well together, right? And you think,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this is a no-brainer, right? This is an absolute no-brainer. But then again, Paul, for me, communication is something that communication with a view to engage is something that I've been doing since I was a girl. I was the first one of 6. And I soon found out that I needed to be able to clearly align with my younger brothers and sisters so that they would be quiet when I was trying to study. That gave
Yeah.
me great skills for my later life, as it is often the case.
Yeah, having a lot of siblings teaches you a lot of lessons. I
A
grew up in a
lot.
family of 7. I was the middle child, but I can relate to some of that. So
You were lucky because you were kind of lost in there, whereas I was always up there to be told, must be your fault. You're the eldest. That's
no,
funny.
I could hear you on that one. So yeah, I did get lost a little bit being that middle child. But kind of switching gears here just a little bit. A few months back, you wrote a piece about the predictions called Predictions for Finance, the Changing Landscape. And you talk specifically about FP&A and your thoughts on FP&A in that article. Can you share a little bit, what prompted you to write that article and kind of maybe some of those key things about FP&A?
Yes, sure. So as a change manager, to an extent, you don't have to be a finance specialist as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to keep my finance specialism because I've always found it a differentiator.
Sure.
There's a couple of things interesting things in finance. One is the aspect of the automation of the operational finance, if you like, and that takes place more on the implementation of tools such as robotic process automation that automates the more manual tasks in the domain of purchase to pay, quote to cash, R2R. But the other exciting thing is the FP&A. I alluded at the beginning, actually, Paul. The finance, FP&A, its history has always been manual, historically focused, control-driven, siloed. The future of FP&A will have more a focus on the predictive analytics, on value-added scenario planning, on advanced forecasting, on the better visualization of data, on the real-time insights. So that to me, what attracted me and to write about FP&A, or what is now becoming known as XP&A, is the excitement of all these things. Because, as I said, the challenges in finance are the same, but the enabling tools are not. The enabling tools with AI absolutely are extraordinary in allowing the integration of external data, not traditionally used, with internal data. If you think about a tool, even a super simple tool like Microsoft Power BI, is a very powerful tool because it has a data repository which sources data from many sources, right? External and internal. And then allows the visualization of this data, which being visualized is more easily communicatable to the business operations. You explain a well-designed graphics. It's easier to explain than just a complex spreadsheet with a lot of macro in it, right? And I found, wow, that is extraordinarily exciting future for finance. I don't know if you and I have discussed this on LinkedIn, but the Wall Street Journal has done a very interesting series of articles recently on the CFO and the way they see their future, the future of their function, the future of their teams. And they interviewed the senior finance leader at Google and Microsoft, at Prudential Financials and Applied Materials. And I found it very interesting that all the leaders there recognize the power of the new automation tools. Machine learning, for example, or the fact that you can use NLP, natural language processing and natural language search to interrogate data, for example, in Microsoft Power BI. They recognize all of this, as well as recognizing the need to upskill their finance team, not just in becoming proficient in the use of the new technologies, but also in becoming great communicators, great negotiators, and providers of insight to the business operations, thus becoming true business partner. Now, I find that extraordinary. And having been in finance for a very long time, I know that the CFO are at the very center of that process of extraordinary transformation of their enterprise, but also of finance. And let's face it, CFOs have always been there with the technology. They've been working with ERP and going mad with ERP since the 70s, the 80s, right? So they're very well positioned to now harvest the new technology. That's what fascinates me about the FP&A space. Does that make sense, Paul?
No, it totally does. And I can completely relate to that. Is just, FP&A has totally changed. A couple things you said. One, the technology is exciting. Things you can do in Excel today to 10 years ago. If people learn new Excel,
Yes.
I mean, you can query Excel like you can BI, right? It has
Yeah.
natural language in there. You can do fuzzy matching. You got an SQL tool. You got connectors. I mean, you got a data model. So many things that, most people have no idea. And then you start to go beyond that to all these customized tools for certain use cases, a planning tool or, a payment tool or whatever that may be. They're much more intelligent, much more customizable ability to automate than they used to be. But, as you get back to, I love you said, it's kind of FP&A is, CFOs are getting their arms around all this data. And you talked about, the next thing that the employees need, we see a lot of that, is you hear the term thrown around all the time, business partnering now, right? Something FP&A should have always been doing, but it's kind of that buzzword today, along with XP&A. The idea of, finance needs to be that hub that brings the planning together operationally, finance, strategically, and helps influence and create value for the business. And that requires, like you said, upskilling. The skills of Excel 10 years ago or whatever tool you were using are no longer sufficient to really analyze and drive value. Being able to visualize, whether it be Power BI, Tableau, whatever, right? We could list 20 different tools. But those things, and then being able to bring that together and influence the business. It's exciting how technology serves as an enabler. If
Yes.
we're willing to put in the effort to implement it right and upskill ourselves so that we can take advantage of what's available to us today.
It's super exciting, and of course, at the same time, people. This is hopefully is not just another fashionable idea, but it is the case that people can be freed up to do more added value work as they move away from all the the having to do the manual journals because the ERP is not fully configured, because there's always some kind of data to go and clean up. Well, the role, especially of the FP&A analyst, goes from being an admin role to being a strategic role. And with those intelligent solutions, with these automated tools, intelligent tools, analysts can play what-if scenarios, testing assumptions and seeing the impact of decisions ahead of making them.
That's a great point of being able to see, the impact of a decision before you make it, being able to do that scenario planning, understanding your drivers. So as we talk about all this, I think sometimes, I get a lot of notes on LinkedIn, different things. I think people don't know where to start, or they get a little intimidated thinking my job's going to be automated away, right? Whether they're an accountant or wherever they are in finance. Yeah. So as we talk about, kind of specifically FP&A, and as you look at, how things have changed over the last decade, what do you see as kind of those key skills somebody needs to focus on to be successful? What do you see kind of, as we go forward into the future?
I suppose there's many answers than one might give, but perhaps I can share what I have done a couple of years ago, okay? Because I'm a great believer that the only skill that you have to develop across your life is to keep close to where the market is going so that you keep yourself relevant. A couple of years ago, I thought, okay, so I knew I was going to set myself up, as we discussed, after my Diageo experience as an advisor to the CFO. But a couple of years ago, we started 2-3 years ago, there was a lot of talk about automation, RPA, AI, cognitive automation. And I think, oh my God, what is all of that? So I'm somebody that I've always loved technology, even though it's not, if you like, natural to my culture or to my generation. That's why I got myself into technology, because I would be damned if I didn't understand it. Okay. And 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, right, let me go and find out about automation. So I did a course at the London School of Economics on the business, on the implementation in business of automation technology. Well, it was a mind-blowing course. That is
Yeah.
where I learned about RPA, about cognitive automation technology. And that is also where I learned that when people say, all the clever software vendor, they sell their solution as artificial intelligence. Oh, it's not really artificial intelligence. It certainly isn't artificial general intelligence, which is the reaching of parity with humans. But to cut a long story short, get yourself absolutely upskilled on the technology. If you are an FP&A analyst, go and find out the latest on the automated FP&A, which are the best tools. What is the essential item of the automation? Why is that technology automated? Does it build on machine learning? Is it built on machine learning? How does the machine learning actually works? How do you train that system, that tool, that application in really getting better the true meaning of the machine learning, if you like? That's what you have to understand. And if the tool gives you visualization of data, go and learn about that as well. Learn to communicate to the business operation in using those terms. So that is a great, that's what I've done. And sure enough, I've written a blog on clarity on all these various RPA, AI, CA, etc. Ultimately, the emperor really has no clothes. It really doesn't take a lot to understand, but it's important to understand. It's important to keep yourself up to date, resilient, see where the market goes, and make sure that you can skill yourself up to go with it. Whether if you are employed, talk to your employers. Employers now are starved of people with digital skills. In the UK, there is a great dearth of digital skills, right? So employers should absolutely help people upskill, whether it's paying for the training or retraining them, etc. Don't feel that the technology will take away your work. I mean, that's the subject of a completely different podcast. But if you keep yourself upskilled, it is very unlikely that the technology will take away completely your ability to earn a living. Does that make sense, Paul?
No, it completely does. And I totally agree with you. We hear all the buzzwords and they're nice and there's great technology with them. But if you understand the market, you understand how to use the tools, you understand how to do analysis and communicate and drive value, you will always be valued.
Yeah.
And, and that's the key. Know where the market's going, make sure you're relevant, make sure you can communicate and you have the appropriate technical skills to add value. And you'll always find employment. Sometimes going to be difficult, sure. We've all had challenges, but you'll be prepared and you'll be in a better position than many of the people around you.
Yeah. And don't forget that this post-COVID world is also giving us great opportunities. I now work regularly with teams that are, at the other side of the world. Teams that we would not have worked together beforehand because you couldn't reach them. They were a business trip away. Now we're all there working with the new communication and collaboration technologies. It's incredible the amount. It's incredible what you learn from people that you would never once come across. I love that.
No, I do as well. Like just, the fact that if LinkedIn wasn't there, you and I probably would have never connected, right?
Exactly.
We'd never have this opportunity to be here chatting. And I think, this morning I was on the phone with somebody in India. And I'm on the phone with someone in the UK. Next, I'm going to be on the phone with someone in Michigan on a call in California, and by the end of the day, I'll also on the phone with some people here in Utah and, so all over different countries, different states. It's amazing the opportunity that technology has brought us. It really is.
I agree. And I love it.
So just a few more questions here for you. As you look at, kind of FP&A and where it's going in the future, what do you see as maybe its biggest challenge and then its biggest opportunity going forward?
The biggest challenge is very simple, is the change management. Because that the description I gave a few moments ago of how FP&A will change is not going to come about miraculously. It's going to come about with a very deep program of change management, so that all the impacted communities understand what's coming and have the opportunity to contribute. So if I were a CFO embarking on an FP&A transformation, I'll call a good change manager. Okay? Somebody that subscribes to my way of doing change. So strategy alignment, change management capabilities, putting the house in order, right? It would take me 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes with a CFO to just list the essential things that they ought to be considering in order to give their FP&A transformation the best chance to succeed. Okay, so definitely the challenge relies is within the change management, and at the same time, make sure that there is a strategic alignment within that, right? So that we don't just automate FP&A because we must. Let's do the financial information model first, clean the data, etc., etc. And the opportunities, I think the best opportunities are to do with the fact that instead of just looking at what history tells you, now suddenly with the predictive analytic, you start looking into the future and looking at what the external environment tells you. I was referring to earlier as sentiment analysis that you can harvest from social media, the weather, the lockdown states, all these external input and insight coupled with your internal understanding of your business is going to be the biggest opportunity and the best opportunity for FP&A.
No, I like that. It's exciting to think when you marry internal and external what you can learn. Right? There's a lot of opportunity there. So, kind of a question that would be interesting to our audience. Tell us something that, not many people would know about you, something they may not find online, something kind of unique.
That's a trick question right there, Paul. Oh, okay. So I suppose I am a heavily vegan vegetarian.
That would do.
That would do.
And what made you decide to be a heavy vegan vegetarian?
Just expediently, I had one of my sisters that lived with me in London many years ago. She was a great cook, unlike me. So I would go home and the house would smell of this beautifully cooked fresh bread. And I started eating her food and never looked back.
No, that's great. And yeah, I can imagine good cook. Good food is something I love, so I can appreciate that.
It's something I love to eat.
I do as well. It's why I find I have to exercise more these days.
Okay, well, I do that a lot. So I have a big tick next to exercise.
Funny. So as you know, DataRels is an FP&A platform based on Excel. And so I'm curious, do you have a favorite Excel function?
That's another fantastic question. So unlike a lot of noise that you hear now about Excel, we shouldn't use Excel, I absolutely don't agree with that. Excel is still one of the very powerful. It's a powerful tool wherever you deploy it. And as you say, Paul, now the functionality within Excel is extraordinary. In Microsoft Power BI, Excel can just be another source of data. But to your question, my absolute favorite, and I no longer use Excel as I did when I was a finance analyst myself, but the pivot table. I mean, the pivot table, how quickly can you get at an understanding of the data from 20,000 miles above the earth unless you had a pivot table? You tell me.
No, I love a good
function.
pivot table. I think I spend some time pretty much every day in a pivot table, it feels like. Less so now as I'm going into my own business, but definitely during my finance careers, I'm doing those analysis often in a pivot table. It's a fabulous tool.
It's
So
a
I
fabulous
appreciate
tool.
that
Yeah.
answer. It's always fun to see what functions and things different people pick.
Yeah.
So I
And
appreciate that.
when I ask my teams, when I say, "Oh, can I have that? Can I have that visibility of the data? Can you tell me this and that?" And they say, "Oh, I feel a pivot table coming on." So, I'm simply spreading the knowledge, so.
So funny story. I worked with a boss that, he'd worked in investment banking and he was phenomenal in Excel and building models. But one day he admitted to me, he had never admitted, he goes, I've actually never used pivot tables. I really don't know how to use them. And I'm like, they're easy. You really need to figure it out. And took some time in showing him. And you could just see, he'd seen plenty of analysis done in it, but he had never really known how to do them himself. And it was a kind of an eye-opening moment, I think, when he realized, how much more they added to the things he was doing. So that's a great one.
Absolutely.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed visiting with you today. Really appreciate you carving out some time, and I'm glad it's worked well this time. We didn't have the technical problems like our first attempt at this. As Francesca knows, we had a few challenges, so she was grateful enough to come back and visit with us again. And we were just excited to have you on the show, and look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn and kind of following you as you continue forward in your career, because we need more people that are out there championing for change management and for transformations, because really transforming the back end and the technology along with the processes, the people, and getting that house in order can allow FP&A to do extraordinary things. So I'm really thankful for your time today. Again, thanks for being on the show.
And thank you for having me, Paul. It's been my pleasure.
You have a great day, Francesca. Enjoy your evening, and we'll chat soon.
We'll chat soon.